I woke up to tire tracks cutting straight through my farm. Not a trail. Not an easement. A full-blown road, carved right through my pasture by the HOA next door. They had bulldozed fences, flattened grass, and started routing their residents through my land like it was public property. So I did nothing. I just opened the gates, and let my livestock do what they do best. Within days, their illegal road disappeared. And the HOA panicked. The first thing I noticed was the dust. A thin brown haze was hanging over the far end of my south field, drifting lazily in the morning sunlight. At first, I thought one of my tractors had been left running, but then I heard the sound that made my stomach drop. Cars. Not on the county road. Not on the gravel drive. Cars on my land. I grabbed my binoculars and walked to the fence line that separated my farm from the new HOA development that had popped up like a concrete fungus over the past year. What I saw made my jaw tighten. There was a dirt path, wide enough for 2 cars to pass, cutting straight through my pasture. Fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the grass. Fence posts had been pushed over. One section of wire had been neatly rolled back like someone had politely borrowed my boundary. And there they were, HOA residents, driving through my farm like it was a shortcut to the main road. I watched a shiny SUV bounce over the ruts, narrowly missing one of my cattle who had wandered too close out of curiosity. The driver didn't even slow down. That pasture wasn't empty land. It was where I kept my livestock. Cows. Goat. A couple of stubborn old donkeys who hated anything that moved faster than they did. And now the HOA had carved a road right through it. I jumped into my truck and drove down to the breach. Up close, it was worse. Heavy equipment had been there. You could see the blade marks where grass and topsoil had been scraped away. They hadn't asked. They hadn't even pretended to ask. They'd just taken it. On the other side of the torn fence was the HOA's bright, pristine development. Perfect sidewalks. Trimmed hedges. A big white sign that read, "Welcome to Meadow Ridge Estates." The irony nearly made me laugh. I crossed over and walked straight into their little welcome area. A woman in yoga pants and a visor was standing near a kiosk, tapping on her phone. She looked up when she saw my muddy boot. "Can I help you?" she asked, already annoyed. "Yeah," I said. "Why is your neighborhood using my pasture as a road?" She blinked. "What? You bulldozed a path through my farm." She scoffed. "That's an access route. It's on our development plans." "I don't care what's on your plans," I replied. "That land is deeded to me." She rolled her eyes. "Sir, the HOA has the right to reasonable access." "No, it doesn't." She pointed vaguely. "That area was unused." I stared at her. "It has animals on it." She waved her hand dismissively. "Livestock will adapt." That was when I realized something important. They didn't think I'd fight. To them, I was just some farmer in the way of their convenience. I walked back to my truck without another word. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the county. I went back to my barn and started opening gates. By noon, the HOA's little shortcut was busier than the county road. SUVs, sedans, delivery vans. They all rolled through my pasture like it was a public highway. Some drivers waved. Most didn't even look. To them, my land had already become theirs. But to my animals? It was still home. I leaned against the fence post, watching my herd slowly drift toward the new road. The cows were curious. They always are when something changes. The goats were already sniffing the torn grass, nibbling at the fresh dirt like it was some kind of buffet. Even the donkeys, who usually ignored everything, had wandered over to investigate the ruts. I didn't guide them. I didn't scare them. I just let them be animals. And animals hate roads. Cows hate uneven ground. Goats love to climb. Donkeys love to block things. Within an hour, the first traffic jam formed. A silver sedan came bouncing through the pasture and had to slam on its brakes when one of my biggest cows stepped right into the middle of the track. She stood there chewing, calm as could be, staring straight at the hood. The driver leaned out his window. "Hey! Move your cow." She didn't. Behind him, another car pulled up. Then another. Soon there were 6 vehicles stuck behind one stubborn, unimpressed bovine. I smiled. By mid-afternoon, it got better. The goats had discovered the soft dirt and started digging at the roadbed, tearing it up with their hooves. The donkeys laid down right in the wheel ruts, rolling around and kicking up mud like they'd been waiting their whole lives for this exact moment. And the cows? They pooped. Everywhere. Nothing reclaims land faster than livestock. The HOA noticed by the next morning. I was finishing my coffee when a white SUV rolled up to my barn, tires already caked in mud, and something that was definitely not mud. A man in a polo shirt stepped out, holding his nose. "Are you the property owner?" he demanded. "Sure am. You need to restrain your animals. They're obstructing our access road." "That's not your road," I replied. "That's my pasture." He scoffed. "The HOA board approved it. And I didn't." He gestured behind him. "Your livestock is creating a health hazard." I glanced at the cows peacefully reclaiming their territory. "They're being livestock." He tried a different tone. "Look, we're just trying to give our residents a convenient exit. Through my farm." "Yes." "No." His face tightened. "Then we'll have to take legal action." I shrugged. "Go ahead." By the 3rd day, the path was unrecognizable. Mud pits, dung piles, hoof prints everywhere, fence sections bent and twisted by curious animals leaning on them. The HOA's pristine shortcut had turned into a swamp. Cars started getting stuck. A delivery van had to be towed out. Someone ruined a brand new BMW when it sank axle deep into a spot the goats had churned into a mud bath. That's when the complaints exploded. I got calls, emails, even a visit from 2 HOA board members. They stood at my fence, staring in horror at what their access road had become. "You've destroyed it," one of them said. "No," I replied. "Your shortcut just met reality. You need to fence this off immediately." "I already did," I said, pointing to the boundary they had bulldozed. "You tore it down." They were silent. Finally one of them muttered, "We'll be speaking to our lawyers." "Good," I said. "So will I. But here's the thing. I didn't actually need to. Because every hour my animals stayed on that path, it became more obviously, undeniably unusable. And the HOA was starting to realize something terrifying. They hadn't just built a road through my farm. They'd built it through a living, moving, stubborn ecosystem that was not going to let go. By the 4th morning, the HOA's access road was no longer a road. It was a battlefield. Deep ruts carved by spinning tires filled with brown water. Mud slicks coated everything. Hoof prints overlapped tire tracks so badly you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And right in the middle of it all, like living roadblocks, were my animals, chewing, lounging, and absolutely refusing to move. A minivan tried to pass through just after sunrise. It made it about 30 feet before sinking into a soft patch the goats had dug into the night before. The engine revved. The wheels spun. Mud sprayed everywhere. A donkey brayed loudly, offended by the noise. The driver got out, stared at the mess, and screamed into his phone. That was when the HOA finally snapped. 2 pickup trucks rolled in together, both plastered with Meadow Ridge Estates logos. 3 men jumped out, all wearing polos and khakis, faces tight with anger and embarrassment. They marched straight toward me as I stood by the fence, sipping coffee and watching my cows methodically destroy what remained of their shortcut. "This is ridiculous," one of them barked. "You're deliberately sabotaging our access." "No," I said calmly. "I'm running a farm. You knew this would happen." "Yes." He pointed at the mud pit where a BMW had died the night before. "Our residents are suffering property damage. Then they should stop trespassing." Another board member stepped forward. "We have development easement rights." I smiled. "You don't." They froze. "What?" "You don't have an easement," I continued. I checked. "You never filed one. You never bought one. You never even asked for one." The men exchanged looks. You can't just bulldoze a farm," I interrupted. "But you did. They threatened lawyers. They threatened fines. They threatened to call the county. I welcomed all of it, because I had already called." By the afternoon, a county land use inspector arrived. He walked the path. He looked at the broken fence. He examined the crushed grass, the exposed soil, and the deep tracks from heavy equipment. Then he checked the plat map. "Yeah," he said flatly. "This is all private agricultural land." The HOA president's face went pale. "But our contractor said." "Your contractor broke the law," the inspector replied. "You don't have a right to be here." The HOA tried to argue. They talked about convenience, about emergency access, about how their residents needed the road. The inspector cut them off. "You need permission, and you don't have it." Then he turned to me. "Sir, if you want this closed immediately, you're within your rights to restore the land." I looked out at the animals, already working on it. That was when the fines started. Every vehicle that crossed my pasture was now a documented trespass. Every piece of damage became an itemized violation. And every time the HOA tried to keep using the path, they just dug themselves deeper. The animals, meanwhile, were thriving. The cows loved the churned earth. Fresh roots and plants popped up where the dirt had been disturbed. The goats treated the mud pits like playgrounds, kicking and digging until the ground was soft enough to swallow tires whole. The donkeys, those stubborn, beautiful monsters, stood right in the narrowest spots, blocking any car that dared to try. The HOA sent emails. They sent letters. They sent a lawyer. The lawyer showed up in shiny shoes that lasted about 3 steps into my pasture before he slipped in cow manure and nearly face-planted into the mud. He left shortly after. By the end of the week, no one was using the road anymore. The residents had gone back to their longer, legal route, grumbling the whole way. Their shortcut had become a warning. Mud. Smell. Animals everywhere. Nature had reclaimed it. And the HOA? They were stuck explaining to their furious homeowners why their illegal road had turned into a farmyard disaster. But the best part was still coming. Because now they had to clean it up. And that meant paying for every broken fence post, every damaged blade of grass, and every inch of pasture they'd tried to steal. The HOA didn't surrender quietly. They tried pretending the problem would just go away. For 2 days after the county inspector left, they kept sending out cheerful emails to their residents claiming the temporary access route would be restored soon. But no one was driving through it anymore. One look at the pasture was enough to convince anyone with a brain that the shortcut was finished. It was no longer a road. It was a livestock-controlled swamp. Then the invoices started landing. First came the county citation. Unauthorized land alteration. Environmental damage to agricultural property. Illegal fence removal. The HOA was fined for every single one. Next came my surveyor. I had him come out with his GPS gear and mark exactly where the HOA had crossed my boundary. He staked it all in bright orange flags, a long, ugly scar right through the heart of my pasture. When he was done, he handed me a report thick enough to stop a door. That report went straight to the HOA's lawyer. Then I sent my own bill. Fence posts, wire, labor, soil restoration, lost grazing, erosion repair, equipment time. Every hoofprint, every tire rut, every patch of compacted dirt was documented and priced. The total was more than the HOA had spent building the road in the first place. They nearly choked when they saw it. I got a call that afternoon from a woman who introduced herself as the HOA treasurer. Her voice was tight and shaky. "There has to be some kind of compromise here." "I already offered one," I said. "Stay off my land." "But this is excessive." "No," I replied. "This is what you broke." She tried to argue that the animals had intentionally worsened the damage. I laughed. "You built a road through a farm." Silence. She tried again. The board is prepared to offer you a one-time payment to make this go away. It already went away, I said. You're just paying to fix it. They didn't have a choice. The county had already put a stop-work order on the path. The inspector told them flat out that any attempt to rebuild it without a legal easement would trigger daily fines so big they'd make their heads spin. And getting an easement from me? Not happening. So the HOA caved. They agreed to restore the land completely, at their expense. Heavy equipment came in under my supervision. The broken fence was rebuilt properly. New posts were sunk deeper than the originals. Fresh topsoil was spread. Grass seed was planted. The churned earth was smoothed back into something that actually looked like a pasture again. All while my animals watched and judged. By the time they were done, the shortcut was gone without a trace. No road, no path, no access, just a fence and a field and a whole lot of very smug livestock. The HOA sent out a final email to their residents quietly admitting that the temporary route had been decommissioned due to legal issues. They didn't mention the cows, but everyone knew. And that wasn't even the end of it, because now their homeowners were furious. They'd been promised a fast exit to the main road. Instead, they got mud, delays, and a massive HOA bill that was about to be passed straight down to them. Which meant only one thing. Someone at Meadow Ridge was about to lose their job. By the time the last fence post was hammered back into place, the mood inside Meadow Ridge Estates had completely flipped. What started as a convenient access road had turned into a financial disaster. Every homeowner got the same email from the HOA board that Friday morning. Due to unauthorized construction on adjacent private agricultural land, the association has incurred significant legal and restoration costs. They didn't list the number. They didn't have to. The special assessment letters went out that afternoon. People in that neighborhood had bought their homes expecting manicured lawns, quiet streets, and a board that knew what it was doing. Instead, they got four-figure surprise bills because their HOA thought it could bulldoze a farm and get away with it. That's when the blame started flying. Board meetings went from polite and boring to full-blown shouting matches. Residents demanded to know who approved the road, who hired the contractor, who failed to check property boundaries. 3 board members pointed at each other. One of them resigned on the spot. Another was voted out 2 weeks later. The president, the one who had insisted the land was unused, quietly disappeared from the HOA website not long after. Meanwhile, my pasture was finally peaceful again. The cows grazed where the road used to be, completely unbothered by the fact that a whole development had just learned an expensive lesson. The goats picked at fresh grass growing over the disturbed soil. Even the donkeys had gone back to ignoring everything like nothing ever happened. Nature had won. A few weeks later, the HOA's lawyer came back. This time, he wore boots. He stood by the fence and cleared his throat. The association would like to formally apologize for the misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. He nodded. They would also like to discuss the possibility of purchasing a permanent easement. I didn't even have to think. No. He blinked. Sir, they're willing to pay. I'm sure they are. But I don't want cars driving through my animals. I don't want liability. And I don't want another HOA problem on my land. He tried again. We could make it very profitable for you. You already did, I replied. By leaving. That was the end of it. The HOA had no choice but to reroute their traffic the long way around, just like they should have done in the first place. Their residents grumbled, but they drove it anyway. The illegal shortcut was gone forever. And everyone in Meadow Ridge knew why. They'd tried to take something that wasn't theirs, and a bunch of stubborn farm animals had taken it back. Now when people in town talk about that neighborhood, they don't call it Meadow Ridge Estate. They call it the place that lost to cows. And honestly, I couldn't be prouder.